Does Deion Sanders have a quarterback dilemma on his hands, or is the answer pretty straightforward on how to handle this quarterback battle? Let me tell you what I think.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Buffs. I'm your host, Kevin Borba. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. We're also brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, for free and available wherever you get your podcasts. So make sure to like, subscribe, and follow so you don't miss out on a moment of the coverage. Let's talk about it. Deion Sanders has what can only be considered, I guess, his first quarterback battle at Colorado, second overall of his career, because when he first got to Jackson State, Shedeur was still a senior in high school. So he didn't really have a quarterback battle until Shedeur got into Jackson State. And even then, I don't know if there was ever a quarterback battle with Shedeur Sanders on campus at either school. So this is technically his second quarterback battle ever, or at least in college coaching ranks. And it's a pretty big one, right? You are building off a 9-4 season where, with a few games, I think there's 3 games left in the year, you had a chance to make it to the Big 12 championship, which means you had a chance to make a run at the college football playoff, and you fell short, right? And Shedeur Sanders was one of the best quarterbacks in the country, Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award winner. He was an AP All-American. Like, the guy did everything for you, and I think he masked a lot of the flaws that the offense had. So now you're turning to a different quarterback for the first time, and your options are Kaidon Salter, who's one of the best dual-threat quarterbacks in college football, at least at Liberty, or Julian Lewis, who's a 5-star, ranked as the highest quarterback in program history, highest ranked quarterback in program history, that is. So you have a really interesting debacle, because I think a lot of people instantly go, hey, if Julian doesn't start right away, he's going to leave the program. Or, hey, if Kaidon, if he's not the number one guy coming out of spring, he's going to leave the program, right? And I think the best way to handle this throughout spring, so that way, and this is going to sound a little snaky, but you have to play as a game, right? And this is my method on how I would decide this battle in spring. I wouldn't decide it in spring, or at least not within the team unless it's too obvious, right? Unless the battle decides itself and say one of the quarterbacks is just like a leg up above everybody, then you lose the team's respect if you don't go, okay, Kevin, we're going to use me as an example because I don't want you guys to think I'm picking a quarterback. We'll go, Kevin is just balling. We got to go with him, right? And I think the team recognizes that. The team always knows, or at least has an idea of who should be the starter. But in this case, if it's close enough in spring, you don't decide it and you split the reps the entire time, right? I saw this question posed on social media the other day. Forgot who was talking about it, but I thought it was a great question, and I wish I remembered to give them credit. But so if they're watching, shout out to you. But I saw this question and I thought it was a really interesting one, because I think there's this like whole fear of like losing someone. And the correct answer on how to manage this quarterback situation is you split the first team reps, right? You go Kaidon Salter, Julian Lewis in order one day with the first team. Like, say there's 100 first team reps, right? I doubt there's that many, but say there's 100 reps. Kaidon gets 50, Julian gets 50. The next day, Julian goes first, 50, 50, same thing throughout the entire spring, right? So that way they each get a chance to work with the starters, and they each are at least of the mindset that they're in the mix for the job, so that way you don't lose either one, because you don't want to go into next season with not a lot of depth at quarterback, right? They still have Ryan Staub, who's been the backup for the past couple of years. So I guess that's a good plan, but I really like the Kaidon Salter, Julian Lewis quarterback room, depending on the order, however you want to put it, much more than the Julian Lewis or Kaidon Salter and Ryan Staub room, right? I just think that there's more potential with both of those guys there. So realistically, like I said, you give them both a chance, right? I think Kaidon Salter, he's obviously proven more because he's played at the college level. He's a veteran quarterback with, let me pull up his stats here. He's literally one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in college football. And I don't think people really understand that. And I think this past season's numbers weren't as good as the year before, but they were still impressive, right? Over his career, like this past year, we'll just go with this past year. 1,800 passing yards, 15 touchdowns, 6 picks, rushed for 587 yards. His peak, though, his best season was 2023 when he led them to a New Year's Six bowl game. Completed 61% of his passes, completed 28 or threw for 2,800 yards, 32 touchdowns, 6 picks, also rushed for 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns. So he's dynamic, right? He is one of the most electric quarterbacks in the country. Julian Lewis has absolutely shredded the high school ranks. I think he I think his team came up just short of winning a state title. That being said, he still proved to be one of the best overall players in the country during this past season, which was his junior and final year because he's skipping his senior season. He threw for 3,700 yards, completed 75% of his passes, a career high. His previous high was 65 as a freshman. Threw for 48 touchdowns and 7 picks with a QB rate of 141.3, which is also a career high. Yards per game, 253. Average yards completions, 14.2. Not that much of a dynamic runner. 86 86 yards rushing on 2.8 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns. So he's clearly much more of a pocket passer, and clearly he's a good one at that at the high school level. How do I think this is going to play out? I think you go with experience, right? I think the quarterback debacle, you don't settle in spring, you settle it in fall, unless it's really obvious in spring that one of these quarterbacks is better than the other. Because then if it's obvious, you go into fall camp and that's one question you don't have to answer, right? I think there's going to be a lot of questions for this Colorado team because you're replacing a whole wide receiver core. You're pretty much bringing in a new offensive line outside of Jordan Seaton. I think everyone else is going to have to fight for their jobs. Defensive line is going to have some changes. Secondary corners are going to be the same, or at least 2 of them. And then you have a new safety duo, right? So you really have a lot of decisions to make. And for Colorado, knocking out the quarterback one would be easy. So if it's that obvious after spring ball, you go with whoever that is, and you risk losing someone after spring ball. That being said, I don't think it's smart for guys to try to enter the portal in the spring window and think they're going to win the job in fall camp, which is about a month and a half or so, right? I just don't think that's the way to go. So, yeah, I think for all those that are trying to make this a huge deal, you really just let them compete. Don't make it obvious, right? You want to tease them a little bit with the carrot, like encourage them like a little rabbit, I guess, or not really. It seems aggressive, but you know what I mean, right? You don't want either one of them to give up. You want them to sort of both feel like they have a chance. And if you're like making it obvious who's winning and it's not that obvious to them, then you're going to shoot someone's confidence down, and they may leave the program. You don't want that. And the best way to maximize your quarterback room is to have both of these guys in it. So that's the best way, in my opinion, to sort of settle this quarterback debacle. You don't settle it officially until fall camp unless it settles itself, and let the best man win, right? Let them get as many reps as possible. The offense should look very different with Pat Shurmur calling plays for a quarterback that isn't Shedeur Sanders. The run game should be a bit better. Offensive line is hopefully going to be better. Otherwise, it'll be another down year of pass protection and run game. And we got a lot of questions to answer at wide receiver. So Coach Prime, Colorado have a pretty big spring ball ahead of them. And I don't think there's a more important position battle than the one that they're going to have at quarterback. When we come back, I think all signs of the NFL draft are pointing to Shedeur Sanders going to a team that we weren't previously expecting. Welcome back to Locked On Buffs. Appreciate you guys for tuning in every single day, making me your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow so that way you don't miss out on a moment of coverage. This episode of Locked On Buffs is brought to you by FanDuel. The tournament is heating up, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from money line to point scores and threes drains. Plus, FanDuel lets you combine your biggest bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On Buffs. Appreciate you guys for tuning in every single day. Like I said, making me your first listen. Let's talk about the noise from the NFL draft, right? There's been a couple things that people are talking about with Shedeur Sanders. He's not throwing, as we talked about, I think, a couple days ago or yesterday. I don't remember. We talked about it, though. I thought it was the right decision. I've said this time and time again. I don't think he really benefits from anything at the NFL draft, NFL scouting combine, outside of talking to the teams, which is his job interview, if you will. But him throwing to guys he doesn't know really doesn't make sense, really doesn't matter for him. So here's what we need to know. Well, there's a lot of sort of noise happening with the combine occurring. And what we're seeing is the two teams that Shedeur Sanders has been linked to the most, the Raiders and the Giants, they don't want or at least they don't seem to want to have to take a quarterback, right? There's been multiple reports. Tom Brady is pushing hard for a veteran quarterback. There's been reports that him and Matthew Stafford went skiing in Montana at a resort or a lodge or something. Conflicting reports. One reporter said that Tom Brady took him. Another reporter said that they happened to be up there. I don't know how you happen to be in Montana at the same time, especially at the same resort. I just don't see that happening. But so it just depends on who you believe, I guess. But either way, Stafford, Brady, Montana, it happened, right? So these guys, Tom Brady's trying to get a quarterback with experience. The Rams, who maybe could have been a Shedeur Sanders suitor if they moved on from Matthew Stafford, they have Aaron Rodgers wants to go there. Let's just call it how it is. So realistically, the Rams are going to end up with Stafford or Rodgers. The Raiders are going to end up with Stafford. Zach Wilson is another name. I don't know if they build around, like they're not going to they're not going to sign Zach Wilson thinking that he's their guy, but that could just be a stopgap for next year's class, which could have some better talent with Arch Manning and other guys coming into the draft. And then you also they could draft a quarterback, right? That's also a possibility. So the Raiders seem to be pushing really hard for a quarterback that is a veteran. The Browns have interviewed Shedeur Sanders, right? That's an interesting move to me because I think for them, and Adam Schefter says he's confident, that's like the one thing he's confident about the draft, they're going to go quarterback. So at the end of the day, it just depends on which quarterback they like more, or if Cam Ward's gone at 1, they're going to go Shedeur Sanders at 2. Now, I think there's been a lot of questions about what Deion Sanders would do if a certain team, which we didn't know these teams, but he did say at one point it would be an Eli, right? He did say that, where if he didn't like the team or their past history of developing quarterbacks, he'd pull an Eli Manning, which if you don't know what happened with Eli Manning, he was drafted by the Chargers back in the day, San Diego Chargers, shout out, RIP to San Diego. And he didn't want to go there, or his dad didn't want him to go there. And so they kind of like forced their way out. So they got traded to the Giants, and the Chargers ended up with Phillip Rivers, and everyone went on to have jolly old happy careers. But if the Browns take Shedeur Sanders, is that one of the teams that Coach Prime was okay with? I would say probably not, because they've had issues at quarterback. That being said, they do have a really, really good offensive mind head coach. So we'll just have to wait and see. The New York Giants, the other team that has been linked, which pretty much every mock draft now has Abdul Carter going number 1. I think his chances of going number 1 have increased dramatically just because, I don't know, I don't feel like these teams are that confident in the quarterbacks. I think there's sort of this disconnect where it's like, we're not willing to really to hitch our wagons to one of these quarterbacks. Cam Ward is still the favorite on FanDuel, minus 135. Abdul Carter is plus 130. So Abdul Carter is creeping up the ranks, which means Abdul Carter, there's a very good chance he goes number 1. So then the Browns are stuck taking a quarterback. Number 3, the Giants, they've been making it obvious they want a quarterback, whether it's Sam Darnold, Matthew Stafford. I think they go free agent or trade. I don't think they draft a quarterback, which I think a lot of fans would have fun throwing in Shedeur Sanders' face if it doesn't go his way, because obviously he had the cleats. He had the tossed the ball around with Malik Neighbors prior to the Heisman ceremony. I think a lot of people would be excited for that to happen just because they like to hate on people. That being said, it looks like the Giants are also in the Matthew Stafford sweepstakes, and they also are sort of in win now mode because Joe Shane doesn't have a lot of time. Obviously missing on Jaden Daniels last year. Maybe he should ask his son who to draft. Maybe the son will have the right idea, or ask his son who to sign a quarterback. Then the Patriots and the Jaguars don't need quarterbacks. The Raiders, like I said, are kind of looking for a vet. And then Shedeur Sanders at 7 to the New York Jets is what Mel Kiper projected yesterday. And I said it didn't make a lot of sense because I didn't think he'd fall that far. And I also don't know if the Jets with the rookie head coach are a perfect situation for Sanders. But it's looking more like the Jets, or maybe a team like the Saints or the Colts. Maybe they take a quarterback, right? They said that Anthony Richardson is going to have to battle for a starting spot, right? It's interesting. I just don't know which of these teams is going to end up taking a quarterback now, right? Because it seems like they're more so invested on trying to get a veteran, which I can't blame them, right? If you think you're a quarterback away from winning the Super Bowl or contending for the Super Bowl, you don't go draft a rookie, right? That's just how it is. So it doesn't matter how good you think the rookie will be. You just go draft a veteran, preferably someone who's done that before. And Matthew Stafford, he's 37, just turned 37 like last week or the week before. Super Bowl winner, still seems to have a lot of juice left in the tank. You could get him on a pretty big contract and sort of ride him out until the next draft where you're like, okay, this draft, like maybe they want DJ Lagway, Arch Manning, or whoever else is going to come down the pipeline. Like maybe you draft him or you sign him now or trade for him now with hopes of getting one of those quarterbacks later. But it's really going to be interesting to see how things play out, right? Free agency opens, I think it's March 12th. And depending on how these teams act in free agency or they sign anybody, that'll help us decide where Shedeur Sanders goes, because obviously you don't want him going to some bummy team, but you also know, like, I mean, he's going to go to a bummy team, but we all want to know where he's going to go. And I think what these teams do in the free agency period are really going to tell us what happens next. Because obviously, I mean, I don't think a team trades for a quarterback and then goes and takes one of the top 5 pick. They may trade back and give like another team a chance of getting in the mix there for another player like Travis Hunter or someone else, but I don't think you do both. When we come back, people continue to hate on the Sanders family, and I don't know why. Well, I do, but I don't get it. Welcome back to Locked On Buffs. We appreciate you for tuning in every single day, making me your first listen of the day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow so you don't miss out on a moment of our coverage. Let's talk about it. Deion Sanders he took some criticism on social media today, as usual, as I'm sure he does every day, because people just want to hate on him. But at the end of the day, I think he's really good at social media, and I don't think people realize that you could attack him, but what's going to happen is he's probably going to respond with a bit of grace, and then all of your mentions are going to be blown up because people are going to be cooking you for being a dummy. So he wakes up this morning and says, please make sure, which it's a great message, especially with the amount of issues we as a society have with mental health. And I'm saying issues in the sense of we don't do a good enough job checking in on other people, right? I think that's one of the bigger lessons that I've learned within the past few years is from a few people is to check in on those around you, because you never know what people are going through. And so Deion Sanders essentially tweeted that today. He said, please make sure you're okay. You're blessing, helping, and checking on everybody else, yet and still you're bleeding inside. I know you're blessed, making sure we're blessed, but we ain't going to be all right if you ain't all right. We appreciate you. We need you to take care of you. So he's telling everybody, look after other people, look after yourself. And then this guy comments, you should be embarrassed to have your son, Shedeur, not throw at the combine. He'll never amount to anything, and you should be dissatisfied. That's what the guy tweeted or X posted. And Coach Prime said, God is good to me and all my kids. I pray you feel the same feeling that I'm experiencing with your kids. Praying for you, my man. God bless you. So clearly, Coach Prime is not going to answer that. I think it'd be hilarious if he just sent like an NFL mock draft where it's like, hey, Shedeur's going top 10. I think he's doing all right for himself. And I think there's two things that this post really tells me. One, regardless of what Deion Sanders does positively at Colorado or in or around the community, people are going to find ways to take jabs at him and his family. Shedeur Sanders has caught a lot of the brunt recently because there's a lot of people saying that because he wasn't invited to the combine, he should pick up the camera like Deion Jr. or Bucky and do that. And he kind of made the joke like, hey, you guys don't really know how much Bucky makes. Like, he's making a good living doing the videos. And so I think that was hilarious. Realistically, the Sanders family is doing well for themselves. And I think people dislike families they dislike athletes that are confident, borderline cocky, believe in themselves, speak highly of themselves and their family. And that's what Colorado does. That's what Coach Prime does. And people hate that, right? They don't like when people believe themselves and then back it up. So I'm not shocked that people are acting this way towards the family. That being said, I think Coach Prime has proven time and time again that no matter what people say, he's going to do things his way. So it's just unfortunate that we as a society get behind these keyboards and we're like, hey, I'm going to say this to him because I'm tough. And like, I'm just going to get one on Deion Sanders. And it's like, yeah, okay. He just responded to you and gave you your 5 seconds of fame. And now you have a bunch of people messaging you, telling you're a dummy because you just want to hate on people for no reason. So at the end of the day, the criticism is going to continue to roll in. Here's my take on all of it. Deion Sanders is going to do things his way. So far, it's worked out for him, right? He's Hall of Fame athlete, played 2 sports professionally, appears to be doing quite well as a coach, has helped his family succeed, has helped a lot of people around him succeed. Shedeur Sanders, even if Shedeur Sanders doesn't end up being a pro football player, which I'm pretty sure he'll get some sort of opportunity, he had a heck of a career, right? He was a D1 athlete, played quite a few games at three programs, 2 of which were Power 4, Power 5, and the sky's the limit for him. He's dabbled in fashion. He does a lot of things. He's acted. Football is not the end-all, be-all for everybody, right? It is what it is. I'm sure he'll get an opportunity. And then Shedeur, like I've said countless times this past week, him throwing at the combine does nothing for him, right? It doesn't. So he's probably still going to go in the top 10, and people on the social medias are still going to be mad. That shows how life works. So appreciate you guys for tuning in every single day, making me your first listen of the day. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow so that way you don't miss out on a moment of coverage. And I hope all of you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all tomorrow.